Hey everyone, welcome back to Kubrick Corner with me, Sean Wilson. There's a new Dwayne Johnson movie coming out, or to be more precise, there's a new collaboration between Dwayne Johnson and Stephen Merchant, co-creator of The Office, coming out, talking about Fighting with My Family, which I saw a couple of weeks ago. The interesting bit of backstory to this, it's based on the true story of Soraya Bevis, who is a Norwich wrestler, hails from a family of wrestlers who went on to become a WWE global superstar, adopted the moniker of Paige, became the youngest ever winner of the Divas Championship. And I should point out, I only know this as a result of what I know about the film. I'm not a WWE expert at all, as you can probably tell looking at me. And what's happened is that Stephen Merchant has turned this into a kind of rags to riches, kind of underdog rousing comedy drama with the backing of Dwayne Johnson. It's produced through his production company. The story goes that Dwayne Johnson was shooting one of the Fast and Furious movies over here in Britain, and then he came across a documentary about Soraya and her family called The Wrestlers, Fighting with My Family, and then he took it upon himself to put the story on the big screens. He produced it. He got Stephen Merchant in to direct it. Stephen Merchant making his solo feature film debut. He's directed films with Ricky Gervais before, obviously. Cemetery Junction a few years ago, which I actually really liked. I thought Cemetery Junction was really good, and I have to say I really enjoyed this movie. I went in with fairly low expectations. You know, I like Stephen Merchant a lot. I like Dwayne Johnson. I like the way that he pokes fun at his own screen image, and indeed he does so in this. He turns up as himself and gleefully pokes fun at his own image, although he does paint himself as kind of a messiah figure as well, which may be inevitable given his producer role. But I went into this not expecting it very much, thinking it's going to be yet another fairly underwhelming, underachieving televisual British comedy drama that doesn't really owe itself pride of place on a cinema screen. Lord alone knows Britain produces enough movies like that. And I was actually really impressed by how confidently put together this was by Steve Merchant, how well written it was, and crucially how well drawn the characters are. Because I was expecting something, as I said, a bit sitcom-y, a bit televisual, not necessarily something that I could believe in, although this is based on a true story. And I have to say, all of the characters in this are really well written, not least of which is Soraya herself, brilliantly played by Florence Pugh. If you don't know who Florence Pugh is, go and check out the film that she did called Lady Macbeth a couple of years ago, which was a really ferociously dark performance. It really was a breakout performance for her. She is really good as this young girl who wants to pursue her dream, but in order to pursue her dream, she has to turn her back on her roots and go over to the other side of the world. And what tensions does that lead to with her brother Zach, played by Jack Lowden, the equally brilliant Jack Lowden from Dunkirk and Mary Queen of Scots recently. You know, what does it mean for him to potentially give up his dream even as his sister is embracing hers? What does that do? There's this kind of transatlantic tension going on between the sort of very mundane, modest sort of Norwich upbringing and the sort of glitz and glamour and gloss of the WWE ring in America, where she is taken and then trained up by Vince Vaughn's Hutch, who is the very sort of tough talking, almost like a drill sergeant character. And Vince Vaughn in good performance, shocker. It's great to know that Vince Vaughn can still put good performances out. I mean, he was very good in Hacksaw Ridge a couple of years ago. This is kind of him in sort of deadpan dodgeball mode, and I actually really liked him in this film. I thought it was really funny. Then on the parental side, you've got Nick Frost and Lena Headey, who are great as this kind of ragtag, rough around the edges, salt of the earth, sort of father-mother duo who nevertheless really do love their kids, but who's the upbringing of the kids has been less than orthodox, let's say. And actually, I kind of like the way that the movie doesn't sand down the sort of crude, rough edges. These guys are presented as being quite salt of the earth and quite tough, and not necessarily always likable. You know, there are choices that they make that aren't necessarily all that palatable, at least as it's presented in the movie, and they feel like real people. They feel quite jagged and raw at times. They're also very funny, and they're also very relatable, but the characters don't necessarily go down as easy as one might expect, and that is a compliment. I like the character complexity of all of those that are involved, and indeed there are some moments with Jack Lowden, who I think is probably the standout performance in the film actually. his struggles with being left behind in Norwich as Soraya goes on the ascent. Those scenes are actually quite tough and are actually strike at a more emotional chord than I kind of anticipated from the movie. I mean, certainly you look at the poster, you see Dwayne Johnson, you see Florence Pugh, you think, okay, it's going to be a bit ramshackle, it's going to be a bit silly, there's not really going to be a lot of takeaway from it, but there is a lot of takeaway. I think the characters are well drawn. I think it's very, very funny. I mean, the laughs literally from the opening scene in which you get young Soraya and young Zach scrapping with each other, and then the parents come in, and what you think the parents are going to do is break up the fight. Instead, what they do is they encourage them to fight properly. Right from that point, I knew, okay, Stephen Merchant is demonstrating those very, very deft, witty comic chops that we saw in the likes of The Office and Extras. And in fact, kind of makes me think that maybe Stephen Merchant was the guiding light behind those movies, because again, you've got that very witty humour combined with that very character-led sense of compassion as well. I mean, I do wonder whether Stephen Merchant was ultimately the driving force behind those collaborations with Ricky Gervais, but that's kind of by the by. The long and short of it is, I really, really enjoyed this movie. It takes what might even be an unknown story even in the UK, and it makes it glossy, it makes it accessible to a mainstream audience, but it does so in a way that has heart, has sincerity, and has terrific performances from all those involved. Again, I can forgive Dwayne Johnson's slightly messianic role because it is funny, and the film, as I said, keeps up a massive stream of laughs right from the start right through to the end, but it also hits the emotional beats where it needs to. So yeah, I would really recommend people go and watch it. Don't be fooled by its outward sort of modest looking experience. It hits harder when it needs to, and it's also very, very funny. It keeps up a massive stream of laughs. So it's cool fighting with my family. Let me know here at Kubrick Corner if you're planning to go and see it, and let me know your reactions when you do see it. And I'll speak to you soon. Bye.